Good morning. Thank you for joining us today to launch our new microeconomic report. The focus of this new research is on critical topic: how governments can generate value by providing digital public services. At the Inter-American Development Bank, we continue to challenge ourselves and catalyze the region to invest in the most efficient and most equitable interventions possible to boost growth, competitiveness, and social well-being. The world, including Latin America and the Caribbean, is facing a heavy burden of overlapping economic and social challenges. Fueled by the pandemic, Russia's war on Ukraine, and a variety of other factors, inflation is historically high, fiscal space is extremely tight, the poorest are suffering the most, and a dramatic increase in poverty is eroding years of progress. We will look at what can and should be one of the most powerful solutions. Digital tools are nothing less than essential to help governments maximize the impact of every dollar they invest. And precisely, the research we are presenting today tell us which digital programs and policy approaches are most effective at improving lives. Today, the world is online. Technology has transformed the way we shop, we work, and we communicate. Go to any city in Latin America and the Caribbean, and you will see smartphones everywhere. And most households in the region have now internet access. But we all have to continue adapting to this new reality. Many firms have innovated to create digital products that consumers want. The number of tech unicorns in the region has tripled in the last 5 years, and today, Latin America is the world's most dynamic spot for fintechs. The governments of Latin America and the Caribbean have been slower to adapt. While the region is making a steady progress in expanding and improving digital infrastructure and in implementing digital payments and identification, very few governments are offering widely accessible digital versions of their services. Instead, many public services are still available in person only, which takes more time, usually more money, and can exclude rural populations. The deficit became most problematic, of course, during COVID-19 lockdowns. Many governments struggled Guatemala and Jamaica to maintain continuity of public procedures. And examples like this that point the great opportunity we have today to rethink and improve how we deliver public services with the technological innovations at hand. And with so much ground to make up, we cannot delay. We cannot take one step backwards. Let me give you 2 examples from the microeconomic report that illustrate the benefits of public sector digitalization for the region's citizens and for broader development goals. In Peru, videos have been used to create awareness among secondary school students about the benefits of completing their studies. This intervention proved to be highly effective for a very low-cost investment. More children completed their secondary education and with better learning outcomes. We have seen similar evidence in healthcare. Text messages sent to pre-diabetic patients over a period of 2 years that encouraged healthy eating and exercise helped decrease the onset of this disease by an average of 15%. Based on the experience of countries that are advanced in digital government, we can imagine many more tools and intervention in our region that can significantly improve the provision of public services in areas ranging from education to healthcare to fiscal administration. This report also refutes the perception that investing in digital technology for the public sector is too expensive. On the contrary, governments in Latin America and the Caribbean can tap into a range of opportunities that require limited resources and that can be implemented quickly on a large scale with results that are many times more valuable than upfront cost. It is important, however, to embark on this agenda in a very smart way. The region's extremely tight budget and limited implementation capability make it nearly impossible to carry out all potential projects. This report shows us how to use sound economic analysis to identify those that offer the highest added value, the ones that government should prioritize. Of course, digitalization is not a silver bullet, but as a key element of a broader strategy to increase state capacity, it can go far in adding value, increasing transparency, and boosting efficiency and inclusion in public services. This report provides evidence-based, actionable recommendations for governments to realize this potential, and our bank is ready to assist at every step. And so, let me congratulate the IDB's research department, the institutions for development sector, and the social sector for producing this important and timely report. Again, thank you all for your participation, and I look forward to an insightful discussion.
Thank you very much, President Mejia. It's a great pleasure to be here. Thanks for welcoming us to this very important event in which we are going to be presenting our third annual macroeconomic report this year on digitalization of public services. My name is Carlos Cartacini. I'm the coordinator of the macroeconomic group. Unfortunately, Eric Parrado cannot be with us today, but I would still like to thank Eric for his leadership in creating this annual macroeconomic reports. As I said, this is the third. We started with an inequality report, then one on agricultural services, and now we have the opportunity of talking about this very important issue that President Mejia was mentioning. Why is this important? So we already know, and researchers have studied, the importance of what we call general purpose technology. The role that they have on development. We know that they create opportunities and improve productivity. One typical example is electricity. No, thanks to electricity, we can use washing machines. We can, firms can have very elaborated production process. But clearly, we cannot do anything of that if we don't create those machines. Well, something very similar happens with smartphones and with the internet. No? The reason why we carry the smartphones is because there are apps that can guide us from one point to the other, or help us connect to each other. Many of you probably are connecting today, thanks to a smartphone and through the internet. While the private sector has been very active and has helped us increase our productivity, be more connected, reach faster, any place that we want to go, even rent a car or a bike, etc. The private sector has been a little bit slower, and this is an issue that at the IDB we are trying to tackle. Actually, tomorrow is going to be presented the guide for development of this product for the public sector. But one thing that is important to understand, and the same happens with the private sector, is that not every app, not every digital service is going to work. No, we know that some of them are going to have very high returns, and some of them are not. And part of that is what we are going to be looking at in this report. The fact that not everything that glitters is gold. No, and there are many areas in which we want to invest, and there are some areas in which maybe it's not necessary to invest in digital technologies. But moreover, when we do invest, there are many other investments that we have to do in order to be successful. So Julian and Ras will be talking about this in much detail, and then David and Elsa, who is online, will also be giving us some comments. But let me just reiterate the thanks that President Mejia was giving to some of our departments of the IDB that have helped us. The institutions for development sector and the social sector have been very important in the development of this report. We really thank them for this collaboration, for joining us in this an effort that we think that can improve lives in the region. And as I said, the institutions for development sector will be launching tomorrow a digital transformation guide for government. So I also recommend you to look up to that. So thanks to everybody online. Thanks to everybody here. Thanks, Julian, Ras, David, Elsa. It's a pleasure to be here. So, Ras, please.
Thank you so much, Reina and Carlos, for the nice introduction. I'm pleased to present the IDB annual microeconomic report, which this year is about the digitalization of public services in Latin America and the Caribbean. My name is Razvan Vlaicu. I'm an economist in the research department, and I'm one of the coordinators of this report, together with my colleague, Julian Cristia. We also want to acknowledge, as has been said, colleagues from other divisions and departments from the IDB that contributed to this report. Okay, so first part is about old problems and new solutions. So we start from the observation that the LAC region faces some persistent policy challenges. And we all know what these are, but let me give some examples. In the region, we have high school dropout rates and low learning outcomes. There is an increasing burden of non-communicable diseases such as diabetes and depression. Government transactions with citizens and firms are slow and cumbersome, and tax compliance and spending inefficiencies continue to affect government finances. The pandemic obviously has worsened some of these problems. Think school closures and mental health issues. Now, what's interesting is that these ongoing policy challenges are happening in the middle of a technological revolution. So indeed, the digital revolution has truly reached Latin America. So we see this in the digital infrastructure that has been built through investments by the public and private sectors. And although there are still gaps in infrastructure development, we do see that there has been a significant proliferation of internet access, particularly through mobile devices. Digital communications like email and text messaging, online shopping, even social media activity have become really commonplace in the region. So at this point, many in the region are familiar with these digital tools. They have either used them or at least heard about them. But the question we want to pose in this report is, are these digital tools able to improve public services? Are they able to really provide value for sectors such as education or government transactions with citizens and firms? Can public services be made more efficient and perhaps even more inclusive? This report looks at potential applications of digital tools for public services. We want to look at what is the evidence for the impacts of these tools. We would like to know how to compute the costs and benefits of these applications, and also how to minimize the potential implementation risks. So here are some digital applications for public services. There's a wide range of them, of course, but let's look at some examples. In education, we can think of remote learning platforms. In healthcare, personalized text messages using specific health relevant information. In administrative services, online passport applications, and in the fiscal management sector, electronic invoicing. So now, is it really worth trying to go through the effort of digitalizing these services? From the experience of advanced countries in this area, we have seen that digital applications have many promises, but also introduce some new risks. So in terms of promises, obviously digital services are fast and convenient, right? The internet is open 24/7. Also, they provide accuracy and transparency because the data is being stored and can be retrieved later. Digital technologies can actually reduce the cost of providing public services, particularly when they are done at large scale, because the marginal cost of adding an additional user is negligible or sometimes even zero. Digital tools also exploit human digital complementarities in the sense that they take care of routine tasks while leaving the more advanced complex tasks to human providers. Now, in terms of risks, there's always the risk of technical complexity because writing good code and developing software that doesn't crash is not trivial. Sometimes there is the issue of poor user experience, in which cases some users may get frustrated and give up. There's also the possibility of tech bias, where digital tools are emphasized maybe too much and there's too much automation. And also, obviously, there are issues of data privacy and data security that require careful regulation. Now, this report is going to make several contributions. First, it reviews the evidence on the impact of digital applications in 4 sectors: education, healthcare, administrative services, and fiscal management. It performs cost-benefit analysis for 11 policy options that give us a sense of the to quantify the benefits and costs of different options. And based on this analysis, the report makes 6 actionable policy recommendations that guide governments that are looking to make smart investments in this area. To summarize the key messages of the report, I would say, number 1, governments should continue improving digital infrastructure, particularly fixed broadband, to make the internet more available, affordable, and reliable. But at the same time, and maybe this is the key point, governments shouldn't wait until infrastructure is perfect, but they should start developing standalone digital applications that are cheap and they can be deployed quickly and on a large scale. Based on the research in this report, we find that digital applications can offer excellent economic value in terms of cost-benefit ratios. However, we also find that there is wide variation in value added, which implies that we must use evidence to assess the viability of projects on a case-by-case basis. So in part 2, we want to go deeper into, number 1, the state of digitalization in LAC, the results of our cost-benefit analysis, and thirdly, the report's policy recommendations. First, the state of digitalization in LAC. Looking at the data over the past decade, we noticed several trends or patterns in the data. First, the region goes mobile, then access gaps are shrinking, digital firms are growing. However, there is still a significant deficit of digital public services. The region is going mobile. If we look at the data on smartphone adoption in the region from countries that have really consistent surveys of technology adoption, we see an amazing trend in use of smartphones. If we look at Peru, for example, the green line, we see that in 2012, only 9%, can you believe that? 9% of households had a smartphone. And in 2021, over 70% of households are smartphone users. So amazing growth in this area. And you can imagine that if this trend continues, then in a few years, we will have almost universal use of smartphones in the region. Now, the picture is somewhat different when we look at more traditional devices like desktop, laptops, and tablets. Here, the trends have been pretty much flat for the past 7 years. And part of the reason is that we believe that the fixed broadband infrastructure in the region is still very low quality. So only about half of households use these types of devices. Access gaps are shrinking. Another promising development, we see that there is much faster adoption of smartphones for lower socioeconomic status households, represented by the gray line here. So in about 6 to 7 years, we see that access gaps have been cut in half. Now, moving on to the private sector, we see several positive trends. This shows the number of tech unicorns in LAC. Unicorns are companies that are valued at more than $1 billion. So in 2007, we had only one unicorn in Latin America. Can you guess which one it was? By 2020, there were 28 tech unicorns in the region. So looking at the first unicorn, Mercado Libre, I'm sure you guessed. This is a graph of the annual revenue of Mercado Libre over the past decade and so. And we can see an almost exponential trend in revenue growth. So, and this is not an artifact of the pandemic, 2020, 2021, but you can see that the trend started very early on and continued through the last decade. Now, unfortunately, as private firms seem to keep up with the new digital ecosystem, the public sector seems to be a little bit slower. So we can see this when we look at aggregate indexes of digital government, such as the e-government development index. We see that LAC trails behind the OECD, and also in the GovTech maturity index measured from the World Bank. Now, looking at more specific services, here's income tax e-filing. This is only about 40% of the countries in the region provide this service digitally, compared to the OECD, which has almost universal coverage. If we look at online business registration, another basic service, Latin America and Caribbean is at around 35%, whereas OECD is at double that rate, 70%. So now my colleague Julian will continue talking about the results of our cost-benefit analysis.
Hello, everybody. Let me adjust a little bit Please. Thank you very much, Raz, and everybody today. The key question that this report tackles, maybe closer. So the key question that this report tackles is how much value providing digital public service can generate for society. And to answer those questions, we use a methodology that is called cost-benefit analysis. Essentially, what we do is for specific digital public services, we compute it as the difference between the total benefits that that service generates in present dollars minus the total cost that the service would entail. And we, as part of the report, we analyze 11 specific digital public services and look at how much value they generate. We use evidence from rigorous studies and look at the digital public services that have shown improvements in targeted outcomes. Now, we use a standardized methodology across sectors so as to make the results comparable, and we fix the contextual conditions by looking at the value added of implementing these projects for 1 year in Peru. We also explored the robustness of the results, replicating the results for other countries such as Chile, El Salvador, and Jamaica. And together with this report, we are we are also launching a technical document that presents all the methodology, so as if other researchers would like to do similar analysis, they can take a look at how we did it. Now, okay, so to showcase the results of these reports, I would like to present 3 examples. The first example is about the treatment of depression. Depression is a very serious condition that affects all facets of our lives. And anybody that has suffered depression or has a family friend or a friend that suffered knows what I'm talking about. Unfortunately, 21 million people in Latin America suffered depression in 2019. The good news is that there is a specific therapy, psychological therapy called cognitive behavioral therapy that is very effective in the treatment of depression. The big constraint for countries in Latin America is that to provide these services, they need psychologists, and there is a limited supply of psychologists. One way to expand the coverage of cognitive behavioral therapy involves using an app together with 4 sessions with psychology, with this session taking half an hour. The patients in the app, what they do is they review modules about techniques on how to deal with depression. For example, how to avoid negative thinking. And between these sessions, they have to do kind of homework. They have to apply that in practice in their own lives. This model has shown to be highly effective, and using standard techniques from medicine, we have estimated the benefits and cost of this approach. And we found that with an investment from the government of $1.6 million to implement this program in Peru for 1 year, that can generate a value added for society of $39 million. So that is a small investment from the government can generate large value for society. The second example is about sending SMS to remind citizens that they have to renew their identity cards. An intervention implemented in Panama for this intervention showed that the renewal rates increased from 59% to 72%. We estimate that implementing this program in Peru for 1 year would cost about $100,000 and generate the value of $7 million. The third example is about an intervention that involves showing videos to students, conveying the idea that if they study more, they're going to have better opportunities in life. This intervention, when implemented in Peru, reduced the 2-year drop rate from 10% to 8%. And we estimate that this intervention is going to cost the government to implement it at scale $1.1 million and would generate a value added for society of $553 million. Believe me that when we saw these numbers, we were really surprised, and we checked and rechecked and talked with 2 of the 3 authors of this study, and the numbers stand. Now, these results suggest 2 important conclusions. The first one is that governments can make, with limited investment, generate a lot of value implementing digital public services. But the second conclusion is that there is large variation in the value added across different interventions. And in particular, the video intervention that I just talked about has a value added 80 times larger than the intervention that involves sending text messages. Now, the question is, why some projects generate so much more value than others? And our results indicate 4 key factors for those programs that generate a lot of value. The first factor is that they should generate a large benefit per person. And to do that, typically they involve effectively tackling an important problem. The second point is that they need to have low cost. And this typically entails taking advantage of existing infrastructure. The third one is they have to reach a large target population. And the fourth one is they have to have high adoption. If you think about a rectangle, think about the base as a target population and the height as the adoption rate. We want that rectangle to be as big as possible. Now, moving to the policy recommendations. We organize them following the project cycle, from design to implementation to evaluation. The first recommendation is that government should prioritize digital projects based on the expected benefits and costs. And the motivation for this recommendation is that there are many potential digital projects. Government had limited financial resources and especially limited implementation capacity. And as we have shown, there is a large variation in value added across projects. So government should take a look at the benefits and costs of different options and select those that generate more value. The second recommendation is that government should determine the optimal digital human mix when designing digital interventions, and in particular, they should avoid tech bias. A key decision when a government define a digital service is how much importance is going to have the technical component versus the human component. And what we observe is that in many cases, there is a tendency to emphasize the technological component. And we have found over and over many applications where the optimal solution is a mixed solution, one where it's technology and humans taking advantage of their comparative advantages. A good example of this is the treatment of depression. I just talked about an example that is a combination that generates a lot of value, but now a solution with only an app is worse than the mixed one, because with the app solution, many people drop out. The completion rates are much lower. And then on the other extreme, a full human solution, like with psychologists, the problem that it has is that you can cover much less people. So that's why the optimal solution is a mixed one. Now moving to implementation. Our recommendation is that government should invest the resources so as to implement programs that are reliable and also that are intuitive. Reliability is key for a good user experience and also to promote adoption. And to have that good user experience, it's critical that interfaces are simple and easy to use. Especially if we think about promoting adoption of disadvantaged populations, a much easier interface would help that. And the way to do it, the typical way to do it, is to adopt an approach that is called user-centered design, and which basically entails making real users to participate in the design of the interfaces. Scale is critical. So that's why recommendation 4 is that government should maximize scale by using mandates and promotional activities. Starting with mandates, governments can just regulate that different public agencies share data so as to reduce tax evasion and improve the targeting of social subsidies. Also, governments can take advantage of their network that they have with the health clinics, with schools, to promote the adoption of digital public services. And finally, governments, as private companies do, they should implement interventions to promote adoption. And what we have found is that people are key in many cases to promote adoption, but you can complement that with massive low-cost digital communication channels such as SMS and WhatsApp. So until now, we have talked a lot about efficiency, but equity is also critical, especially for us at the IDB. So that's why our recommendation 5 is that government should promote equity in access and use of digital services. And there are several strategies to achieve this objective. The first one is to continue advancing the agenda so as to increase access, reliability, and affordability of internet services. The second recommendation is that government should promote applications that use widely available devices, such as basic cell phones or smartphones. The third strategy is to promote, to target promotional efforts on low-income populations. And here the good example is a program that we have been implementing in Peru that is called Connect Ideas. And as part of that program, we have provided a math app to students in 4th to 6th grade in primary schools in Peru. And with the government and with the research center Gather, we did a special promotional activity focused on low performing public schools in Lima. And the adoption rate there was 8 times higher than in high performing schools. Finally, governments, because digital services are typically much more inexpensive, they can channel the savings that they get from implementing these services to improve traditional services to people that do not have access to technology. And finally, the evaluation phase. Our recommendation here is that government take advantage of digital technology for more efficient monitoring and evaluation. The key here is that data collection from digital platforms is much cheaper and faster than traditional methods. And that allows to implement iterative rapid cycles of design, implementation, and evaluation to optimize processes and services. Second, governments should evaluate first the effects of specific service, like what is the effect of a math app? What is the effect of a depression app? Once they have established that these services work, then they have to focus on, okay, how can we promote the adoption of these tools? And finally, governments can use, obviously, digital methods to improve monitoring, to fine-tune implementation, and to detect problems early on. To emphasize our key messages, the first one is that government should continue advancing the agenda to increase access, affordability, and reliability of internet services. But at the same time, and this is the key message of the report, they should also design and implement low-cost, high-value digital applications. And these recommendations are based on 2 insights. The first one is that there are tremendous opportunities for digital public services to generate value for society with limited investments. And the second one is that there is really a wide variation in the value added across digital public services. And so governments have to be very careful and prioritize those that generate large value. To conclude, I would like to invite you to download the report. I would like to thank a lot all the people that have contributed to the production of this report and to the organization of this event. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Raz and Julian, for the presentation, but also for coordinating this report. I know that this is not an easy task. So thank you. Thanks again for everybody who participated in the report, but also, those who are behind the cameras today, organizing this, but also, in the dissemination team, producing the report, and producing the slides and producing everything that you can see. So thanks to everybody. So let's move forward to the panel. So we have 2 excellent panelists today. One of them is Elsa Esteves. She's the UNESCO Chair in Knowledge Societies and Digital Governance at the Universidad Nacional del Sur. Let me say proudly that the Universidad Nacional del Sur is where I did my undergrad. So I'm sorry, David, but Elsa is my favorite today of the 2 panelists, and it's a pleasure having her here. But also David Evans. He's a senior fellow at the Center for Global Development, working on education, health, and social safety net. Both of them have plenty of experience working on digital apps and cost-benefit analysis, etc. So it's a real pleasure for us. But let me jump directly into it. And let's start with Elsa, my favorite of the 2 panelists. So Elsa, if you can tell us, and Julian allude to this, but some people, and we saw in some of the slides that Razvan was showing, that there is still some digital gaps, between the let's say the upper class and the lower class, etc. So some people consider that promoting the digitalization of public services will increase inequality. What are your views about this issue?
Thank you. Thank you for your comments, for your introduction, and very interesting question. And somehow main comments and main concepts related to this are addressed in the book. Yes, I will start with this. Digitalization efforts were always conceived as a way of providing additional channels for accessing public services and offering many conveniences in the sense that services were offered anytime. You can access services through digital channels 24 hours, 7 days per week, anywhere from home, on the move, and anyhow, using either digital channels or traditional channels like the counter, okay? And in this way, they were aiming at better serving the service recipients. And we started like that several years ago. During pandemics, the situation gave us another perspective, because what happened was that public institutions were forced to offer their services online, and essential services like education, like health, and others. And this highlighted or put on the table unequal differences among the social groups that putting relevant or highlighting the possibility to access and to benefit from those services. And interestingly, vulnerable and marginalized groups, who are the ones who need the most public services and are the ones who need to interact more with the government in order to get such services, they do not have the same capacities, they do not have the same access to internet, and of course, given this, they cannot benefit from the access to benefits and to services in the same way others can do. So there are two perspectives, the light and the shadows, or the bright side and the dark side. On the one side, digitalization of public services is a mean to better deliver public services and to gain significant efficiencies, as highlighted before, yes? But we need to be very aware that it also, it can be deepening structural patterns of inequality existing in society in a pre-digital era. So on the second perspective, what we need to see is, as it is shown in the book, that digitalizing public services is associated with significant increases in efficiency, yes? And also is associated with the release of human resources in the public sector. So employees have more extra time. And the focus and the way to address the inequality here, as one of the recommendations that was that the direct savings of digitalization should be put in order to serve people in disadvantages. So the release of these resources that digitalization provides needs to be used in order to provide more personalized services to these marginalized or vulnerable groups, in the sense of complementing with face-to-face interactions, with spending more time to address these borderline cases that usually automation and digitalization are not treating in a fair way. So this is, I think, the best way in order to ensure that digitalization does not bring more inequality, but on the other side is contributing to provide more personalized services to those people in need.
Thank you. It's very clear. As I was mentioning, one of the recommendations, and as we saw, Julian talked about 6 recommendations. David, so had to choose 2, given that we don't have that. Sorry. So we were talking about recommendations, David, and Julian was mentioning 6 of them. So, but if you had to choose 2, because we cannot go over the time, but which ones would they be and why?
Thanks so much for that question. So first, I also want to commend the team that put together this report. I follow this literature very closely, and I learned a lot of new things in the context of this report. So I would start with the first recommendation, which is to prioritize digital projects based on the expected benefits and costs. Now that seems obvious, and it's true. I agree with what the report says, that there are tremendous opportunities for digital provision of public services. But like Carlos said in the introduction, where not all that glitters is gold, it's very true. And in fact, it's much more common that things don't glitter, or that they do glitter, but they're not gold. So in my experience talking to policymakers, both in Latin America and in other regions of the world, what I found is usually not too little enthusiasm for technology, but too much enthusiasm for technology that isn't informed by evidence. So, there's a lot of excitement about whether it's a laptop giveaway or, various other kinds of interventions. Parents get excited about them, users get excited about them. Many of them don't deliver many returns. A recent review of digital interventions in education in high and middle income countries found that only about a third of software interventions had any sort of measurable positive impact without even considering the costs. And a far smaller percentage of hardware interventions had positive impacts. So there are great interventions out there, and we've seen some great examples in the report, but we have to make sure that we're basing our decisions on evidence. I'll mention one other element, that's mostly about benefits. One other point about costs. One common challenge which is common in all public service interventions, but I think especially pronounced with digital interventions, is there a fair number of projects that fail. Now, why does this matter? When we think about cost benefit analysis, we measure the costs, we measure the benefits, and it sounds simple. But in fact, if projects never even get off the ground, then we don't even include those in our sample. A few years ago, I was working with one of Brazil's richest states, and they wanted to roll out an education technology intervention to better track student absenteeism and teacher absenteeism, to provide support and follow-up. They were very excited about it. According to the numbers on internet access, it looked like they were going to be able to do it, roll it out to every school in the state by the end of the calendar year. The end of the calendar year, they had completely abandoned the project because even though on paper, there was internet access in all these schools and electrical access, in fact, the consistency of internet access wasn't nearly what even the policymakers for that very state understood it to be, which is just to say we need to look very carefully at the costs and the benefits so that we find the gold in the midst of the many, many apps and applications.
Thank you, David. Very, very, very clear. So already, David clearly, mentioned some of the risks that governments face when developing digital public services. So, how they can manage those risks.
I think one of the main risks is, as it was also highlighted in the book, the over-reliance on technology. Yes, because technology is a very important aspect related to all these digital transformation efforts, but it's not enough. It's not the only issue that we need to consider. Governments need to ensure that, for instance, they have the enabling legal and regulatory environment, that the data is accessible, that the public agencies know what they can or what cannot do with the adoption of technologies. And most important, that all the efforts are pursued equally across government agencies, that is really a whole of government efforts, yes? And for this, there is a need for somehow aligning all these efforts into a strategy that gives an umbrella of the different type of initiatives that will be pursued in different government areas, in different policy areas, right? So for this, for addressing this, we need to have a whole holistic digital transformation agenda, and with a focus in the impacts that this agenda will have, in the positives and in the negatives, correct? And also related to the risk of lacking the proper aim of the digitalization of public services, I would like also to comment that using this opportunity tomorrow, on Thursday, in the framework of this digital government ministerial meeting, there is the launching of this digital government transformation guide, which is a research document and also a conceptual and guidance document for pursuing digital transformation. So main risk I can highlight is focusing on technology, lack of contextualization, and the risk of not addressing the specific needs that digitalization or better serving citizens is aimed to pursue.
Thank you. One issue that, we have been mentioning two issues. No, one is that, relying too much on technology, and clearly we need a lot of other investments, and we need cost benefit analysis, etc. But also, in the presentation, we were highlighting that sometimes we don't have the access, no? So the question is that if we had to give an advice to our governments, should we try to push them to prioritize more their investment in expanding access to the internet and to devices, even though clearly it's going well? Should they instead focus on developing the apps or elevating the apps? What should we be doing?
So it's too easy to say both, even though both is always the answer. I think it's important, even though we have seen dramatic expansions in access in recent years, it's important to highlight that there are a number of places in the region where we don't have that universal access or near universal access. So in the lower middle income countries in the region, in rural Nicaragua and rural Honduras, we have much lower access to the internet and to smartphones. And so going back to Elsa's point, the natural tendency of this technology can be to exacerbate inequalities. And so if we don't make sure we expand that access, we risk leaving behind those who are the most vulnerable. So I would say the primary priority, if one had to choose, is on expanding the access to the internet and to devices for two reasons. The first reason is that expanding access delivers a lot of benefits in addition to helping people access public services. So farmers are able to find better prices for their crops. Job seekers are more easily able to find employment, even without public service. And so making sure that people, especially the most vulnerable people, have access to the web and interfaces to access it is a high priority. We see evidence from rural Peru that the rollout of just simple cell phones reduced poverty by more than 5%. So there are big impacts that have nothing to do with public services. The second reason to emphasize the universalization of these of access, even while investing in services, is that the more universal the access is, the higher demand from the population will be for these kinds of apps. And so not just by local government providers and central government providers, but also by third-party operators, entrepreneurs who want to create apps to help people access public services, like we see in high-income countries, many apps that help people access public services, but that are developed by third-party operators. The more people have the internet, the more people have smartphones, the more that demand will come naturally.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Clearly, as David was saying, this requires a lot of coordination, a lot of cooperation, a lot of partnership. We are saying that not every app is successful. So clearly, we need to work together, as we are doing today, in this report, but also in creating this app and these technologies. So, Elsa, can you think of an example of a successful collaboration among several actors for the development of a digital public services? What do you think were the key ingredients for this collaboration to be successful?
Thank you for the question, because it's a very nice example from our city, Bahía Blanca in Argentina. At the time of COVID pandemic, we met together. We have a history of collaboration between local actors, the government, municipal government, the university, and also we have an IT technological pole of the South, gathering IT private companies in the city. And we started to think together, collaboratively, what we can do in order to solve the situation that we were facing, that we didn't know what will happen and how long we need to stay at home. And based on this collaboration, we developed 3 services. One was called Bahía Solidaria, Bahía in Solidarity, which was a web application enabling citizens to request for help, to request for food, for medicines, for assistance, mobility facilities, and others who wanted to help, citizens offering their help, yes? And there was a background information system in the municipality taking care for matching all these requests. This was one. The second one was another platform that was called Stay at Home, for those small, medium enterprises or entrepreneurs who didn't have resources to have a portal or sell their products. We offer just a platform in which they can offer their services, and they were allowed to put a vehicle that was authorized by the municipality to circulate in the streets for distributing products. And the third platform was another one that was called Organize Your Way Out, for controlling where people will go, how much they will move from their homes, and how much people will be attending specific public places. This was done in collaboration with the local government, with the IT pole, with the university, and with a network that at one point we have almost 40 volunteers between university students, university professors, and normal citizens. So I think it was 3 examples of very good practices at the time that the whole society, government, community needs to provide or to serve, solve certain needs. And thinking back in the terms of why we were able to do it, I think one, it was the preparation of the ecosystem. We have a long history of collaboration between each other, government, academia, industry. And this doesn't happen overnight. You need to develop this, and government needs to invest in doing this, because governments do not have the capacity to solve everything. They need this collaboration with the local actors. Second, to develop, to design significant responses crafted to the local needs. And there is a need to invest in understanding the local needs, the group needs, individual needs. And this is one of the strengths of academics. We are prepared for doing this. And this is a key success factor between academia and government collaboration. Second, the development of these contextualized responses to these needs, and for this is key the participation of the government and the industry. So a key message here is involve academia, involve NGOs, industry in the local identification of needs and in the contextualization of solutions. I think is key.
Thank you, Elsa. Thanks for the answer, and also for bringing Bahia Blanca to the floor. So I think it is the first time that at the IDB we have been talking so much about Bahia Blanca. So thank you for doing that. Let me close with the last question, David, which is that clearly at the IDB and at the multilaterals, you were at the World Bank. We are doing a lot of stuff. So we are doing this type of report. We are doing a lot of cost-benefit analysis. We are investing in digital technologies. We are presenting tomorrow a guide for digital governments. Is there anything that you would recommend that we should be focusing on moving forward, as in general? And
That's a great question. I would say there are 2 elements. Exactly these activities that you're doing are excellent roads. I would say 2 elements where I feel like the multilaterals can provide some very strong value added. One, so the report talks about the distinction between foundational investments versus application projects, right? So application projects are the actual apps, and it's important to support governments in developing those. But the multilaterals have a special role in investing in the foundational projects. So the management information systems, health, education, and other public systems. Those aren't sexy. No one's excited to invest in those. And so there's a particular role for organizations like the IDB, for the World Bank. And then the second is to track what works and track what doesn't work. So, an individual government official in Bolivia doesn't necessarily have expertise across the whole region about what's already been tried and shown to be ineffective in multiple places. So they can avoid those pitfalls and invest in the kinds of applications that really have strong returns for their citizens.
Thanks a lot, David. Thanks, Elsa. Unfortunately, our time is up. But again, I would like to thank everybody here. I will ask everybody to go and download the report. There is a lot of work behind it, and I'm sure that if you are here today, if you are listening to us, you will find it very, very interesting. Also, as Julian was saying, there are some technical notes coming up. I'm sure there are blogs and a lot of material that are coming up. And of course, I'm sure that if you go to David's page, Elsa's webpage, you're going to find a lot of very interesting products also on this topic. So let me finish us by thank everybody, and it was great having you all here. Thank you.
Congratulations.